So to get started here, let's go ahead and press D to duplicate this cube, then click down on the middle mouse button to constrain it, and just bring it over to the side here, then press T to bring up our tool shelf, and press this physics control menu. Then we just want to shift select the first cube, come over here and press connect objects to add our object constraint here. And as you can see, if we press play, the constraint is now created for us. So I'll press pause and go back. And also, if you find that the object you want to be moving isn't moving, and you can change that by switching which object has this animated value turned on. So right now, if we press play, this one stays stationary and that one moves. But we can change that just as easily as selecting this one and turning animated on for it, and then selecting the first one and turning it off. If we press play, it will do exactly the same thing on the other side. So I'll press pause and go back. But that was already set up how I wanted it, so I'll switch that back there. Click on this one and turn that off. Next, what I'm going to do is reposition this constraint so that the object connected will spin around it left and right rather than spinning around it like this, which is sort of the whole point of this being an arrow, so we know basically what direction things are pivoting around it. So if I press 3 to go into right view, and then R to rotate, Control to constrain my rotation, and then just snap this up to a perfect 90-degree angle there. And then I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this back one a few times. Something like this, I guess, and we'll go ahead and rig these up. So we'll select this next to last object here, then shift select the last object in the constraint, press connect objects, and we'll just get these all rigged up here. So now if I press play, we'll see this kind of fall a little bit at the end there. If we press back and press play here, these are all set up to kind of sway left and right, so not much is going on. So let's go ahead and make a path. I'm going to press 5 to go into top view, and then I think I'll just right click my cursor over here to start a new path. So I'll press Shift A and under curve, add a path here, and press tab to go into edit mode and select one of these control points. And I'm just going to make sort of like some kind of little fun train track type deal. And maybe at this point we'll press 1 to go into front view and actually have it go up some. So we'll press E to extrude. So now we'll be going up a little bit of a hill here and coming back down to the flat line. Press 5 to go back into top view and E to extrude that out. And I'll just have it end over here for now. Press tab to go back into object mode. Okay, so what I want to happen is for this thing to follow this path. So I'm going to select the top object, and notice that the animated value is pressed down on this one. Then I'm going to shift select the path, and then just like any other object, we just press follow. And when we do, the object will go to the beginning of the path. Of course, if we want this to be going down the other end, all we have to do is select the path alone, and we'll see the option to press reverse. So let's do that. And so now the cube is starting out there. So the cube moved to the new position, but the rest of the objects didn't. Now they'll still work in the simulation, but what we're going to want to do is just manually bring them over to a location that makes sense for the starting point of this little animation. So whenever we make these object constraints via this connect objects button like we did, these constraints are automatically parented to one side of these objects. So all we have to do is shift select the objects. We don't have to worry about actually selecting the constraints. Press 5 to go in top view, G to grab, and we'll just position these to where they're kind of behind this guy here. So now if we press back and press play, and it's moving super fast, way faster than we want. So let's press pause and go back, come down here to our animation path. That's this path here. And let's scale this out from 4 to say 12 seconds. So to get 12 seconds, that's 3 times 4, 4, 8, 12. So we could just press S with these keyframes highlighted, and then press 3, which Blender takes to mean times 3, and which is 12 seconds. So now if we press play, well, we'll need to press pause and go back and press the free all button. This releases all the cache. Now if we press play, these guys will be following this one at a decent speed here. Although you may notice that their back tail is pretty crazy. One thing that will help with that, and it's probably something we should have done with this first constraint, because had we wouldn't have to manually change all the rest of these, is turn off disable collisions. Had we have basically just set it up here, whenever we were connecting all these objects back here the first time, they would have just took on the exact properties of each one, so we wouldn't have to go do this, but not that big a deal. So now if we turn off disable collisions and press play, notice that this follows, much better. Still pretty wildly flailing around there, but we can fix that too. So all we have to do to fix that is select the back object here, and then shift select the path, and we can get it to follow too by pressing follow. Now when we did, it did what it was supposed to. It actually brought that object to the beginning of this path, which is what we want. However, what we're going to need to do is offset this other guy here. So what we want to do is select the first cube here. You can see it's highlighted down in the outliner. And we want to click on this constraint button and where this follow path is, which was generated when we press the follow button to get it to follow. We can adjust this offset here like this, and we want that out a bit, and then we're going to want to select the rest of these, not the back object that we have following, but all the stuff in the middle, and press 5 to go into top view, G to grab. And you can see these relationship lines, make sense a little bit more as we position this stuff, so you can kind of use those to guide how stuff should be set up. And this would have been a lot easier if I had just made the beginning of this curve straight, so we could have a chance to first get these aligned before they're doing a bunch of silliness. So actually I think I'll do that. Let's press tab to go into edit mode. And I'll select this first point back here, press E to extrude, and G to grab, and just so we've got some room to get this thing figured out before it goes on this crazy adventure. So I'll press tab to go back into object mode. So once again, here is the first guy and the last guy, but all the middle stuff, it has no logic connected to the actual curve. It's just going to obey what this guy does and that guy does. So at the beginning of things, we have to set it up manually, the stuff in the middle. So I'll press 5, go into top view, G to grab here, R to rotate this stuff. And this one got spun around, so we'll press R to rotate it, Control to constrain. And looks like we've got quite a bit of room in here, so let's adjust this offset back. I'll move it back like that because I'm going to move these over. We'll select these, G to grab, R to rotate a bit. And let's see if we can move it back just a little bit more. And we can adjust the offset of this one to where it's a little bit like this. All right. So now if I press back and go ahead and press free all to make sure that the thing is reset and we press play, notice that the first object and the last object are following this path. However, all the carts in the middle are pretty much free agents. And as you can see there at the end, because these are both animated to go to the end of this value, that they all get squunched up at the end. So obviously you would want to plan that ahead in your animation and have your animation stop here basically, to avoid that happening. But all the ones in the middle aren't actually following the path. They're just obeying their rigid body constraints, which is really cool for giving us some kind of extra character and motion in that. Or if you wanted these to be even a bit more jingle-jangly, we could press go back and we could change each of these constraints from hinge to point. And now, rather than only rotating from left to right, which is the condition of their hinge, they will basically act as though they are connected to a free kind of chain where they can rotate in any direction. You can sort of see them like spinning and moving, going all crazily. So just, whatever, depending on, whatever your needs were there. Okay, so real quick before we go, let's try this again with some spring constraints. Go ahead and press back here and double right click here in the middle somewhere and add, how about some monkey heads? I'll press W to give that some smooth shading there. And then rather than pressing D to duplicate this, I'm going to press Alt D to help conserve resources, which does a linked duplication, which just makes an instance of the object it was duplicated from's mesh rather than creating all new data, if that makes any sense. So we'll just Alt D, duplicate this a few times here. And so what I want to set up is a spring constraint. So to do that, I'll just shift select this bottom Suzanne head here, press connect objects, and I want to change this from hinge to generic spring. Of course, when we do that, it's not going to give us the exact results we're looking for, just basically falling into oblivion. We have to give it a little extra love. As we learned in the video where we went over every one of these constraint types, which if you haven't watched that, I suggest you go watch that, because it also includes a free download folder of example files of every one of these constraint types. So if we go ahead and click on the Physics tab with our constraint object selected, because these are all properties related to the selected object, and under here, what we want to do is turn on one of these spring values. So it's probably going to be Y. So if we press that, let's see if that's right. Press play. And yeah, that was the right one. Although the object that's bouncing about is not the one we want. So let's press pause and go back. To change that, all we do is select the bottom one, turn off its animated value, then select the top one and turn it on. Now if we press play, notice that this guy is behaving like this spring. So cool. So I'll press pause, go back, and there's a few other things we need to set up with the spring to get it to work right. So for instance, if I were to animate this top Suzanne head here, so say with the timeline back at 0, if I were to press I to insert a keyframe for it, then move the timeline down 2 seconds, press G to grab, move this over here, press I again, and then press back, and then press play. Notice that the spring Suzanne object is not doing what it's supposed to, and that's because we need some additional limits put on the constraint. So I'll go ahead and press Ctrl Z to undo the animation keyframes I added for that Suzanne head because I don't want them. So let's click on this, and over here in our Physics tab of the Properties panel, so we have this Y value turned on for springiness, which we could make this spring a lot harder by increasing its stiffness if we wanted. So up here we have these limits. And these limits basically refer to location and rotation. So what we want to do is lock the X and Z location of this constraint because we don't want the object that's bouncing about to be able to move way down like that in the X axis or the Z axis there. And we also want to change these values all to 0 because otherwise it doesn't work very good. These values, I believe, are meant to create a little bit of cushion so that something isn't so rigidly locked into place, but typically I find it better to just leave these at 0. So now with this constraint all set up how we want, we can just copy it to these other objects super easily. So all I do is select the next object, then shift select the last object of the constraints, press connect objects, and just do that for this one down here too, connect objects. Now if I press play, we'll see these spring constraints working on all of these Suzanne heads. So let's go ahead and double right click here, and under curve, let's just add a circle. I'm gonna press 5 to go into top view, press S to scale, and I just kind of want this going over around the same area as this other one is. Then all we want to do is select this top head here, then shift select the path we want to follow, press follow, and then we just need to select these underling guys and move them over. So press 5 to go into top view, G to grab, and then R to rotate these so that they're facing in the same direction there. Let's go ahead and bring them up like this. Press back to make sure we're at the beginning of our animation. Press free all to make sure the cache has had a chance to reset. Now if we press play, we'll see this Suzanne head flying around all crazy and these other spring Suzanne heads going nuts, which is making me think maybe we should increase their stiffness value a little. So let's do that. So let's select each one of these constraints here, and let's increase the stiffness from 10 to say 45 for each of these. So I'll select each of these and change this stiffness to 45 because we have the Y value of this activated for the spring. Press back here, press play. And now we see them staying, much closer together instead of going all crazy because the sort of invisible springs there are much tighter there. So we could press pause, go back. And of course, because all this stuff is rigid body world related, we can have it running into things, knocking on things. So I could press Shift A and add a plane here for ground. And maybe drop it down a little bit. Scale it up. And then under physics control, press add passive, which makes it a part of the rigid body world group, but locks it into 3D space. You could go ahead and turn on high def shading here to make it look a little nicer. And so say we were to press Shift A, add a cube. We could press Shift D to give it an array modifier, and then quickly just press Alt Shift D until we see that the array modifier is going in the direction we want, which I want to make a little tower of cubes there. So that's the way I wanted it. And then press Shift D some more, because pressing Shift D the first time on an object will create an array modifier. But of course, after that, if you press Shift D again, it will just increase the count of however many array modifiers you have on there. So we'll just like kind of make some little intermittent towers here and there for our little weird box train thing to run into. So we'll close that like that. And then we could press Add Active to give it active rigid body physics. Then we would want to press Separate, so the objects would all become unique. Then press 5 to go into top view, and just press Alt D a few times, and just to have some fun here. All right. So I'm going to double click to deselect everything, press my full screen button, and press play. Well, it's amazing. The monkey heads managed to miss everything, but our box train is knocking the hell out of stuff, which is awesome. So let's pause and go back. We can, of course, edit these paths at any time, scale them up, move them. But if you're going to do that, you would then have to, of course, reposition the objects belonging to the rigid body constraint. So we could make this bigger. I could press Tab to go into edit mode on this circle path here. I could press A to select everything, press W to subdivide. Select one of these points, then press A to select the rest of them. Then under select, press check or deselect. And this is cool because it will select every other point in this circle. So I could do something like press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, and kind of make a quick little something like this. Of course, like I said, we would want to reposition these guys. We don't actually have to select their constraint. We can just select the monkey heads themselves. Press 5 to go into top view, G to grab, and maybe rotate these in the corresponding direction there, something like that. Bring them down a little bit. Looks like they're a bit higher. Okay, so let's press back, press free all, press play. And there we go. Now those crazy things are knocking some stuff down. Pretty sweet.